Jake Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and watched Captain Linda Hayes point at the big screen. The screen showed a green and blue planet that looked almost like Earth, but not quite right. The clouds were too white, and the land masses had strange shapes that hurt his eyes to look at for too long. "This is Kepler 442c," Captain Hayes said in her serious voice. "We found it 3 months ago, and now we know it has intelligent life. They call themselves the Vorthik." Jake shifted in his chair. He had been a soldier for 12 years and thought he had seen everything. Giant space battles, alien ruins on dead planets, and weird creatures that tried to eat his face. But meeting living thinking aliens was new even for him. Dr. Amanda Foster clicked her tablet and new pictures appeared on the screen. Jake's mouth fell open. The creatures looked like huge lizards that learned to walk on 2 legs. They had green scales that caught the light, long tails, and faces that looked both smart and dangerous. Their eyes were bright gold and seemed to see everything. "They stand about 7 feet tall," Dr. Foster said. "They have natural armor plating and sharp teeth. But they also have advanced technology and seem peaceful. They build with crystal and metal in ways we do not understand yet." Ryan Cooper, the diplomat, cleared his throat. He always did that when he was nervous. "Our job is simple. Make friends, do not start a war, and see if we can trade with them. They have metals we need, and we have space travel they want." Captain Hayes looked directly at Jake. "Morrison, you will be our military liaison. Keep everyone safe, but do not act like we are at war. These beings have done nothing wrong, and we want to keep it that way." Jake nodded. "Understood, Captain. What do we know about their culture?" "Not much," Ryan admitted. "They seem to value strength and honesty. They communicate with sounds and tail movements. Our computers can translate the sounds, but the tail language is still a mystery." 2 days. Later, Jake found himself standing on alien dirt under an alien sky. The air tasted like metal and flowers at the same time. The Vorthik city rose in front of them like something from a dream. Crystal towers twisted up toward the too bright sun, and metal bridges connected buildings that floated in the air without any visible support. "Stay close and follow my lead," Ryan said. His voice shook a little. 3 Vorthik waited for them at the city entrance. They wore no clothes, but had metal bands around their arms and necks. Jake could see now that they were even more impressive up close. Their scales moved slightly as they breathed, and their gold eyes tracked every movement the humans made. The biggest Vorthik stepped forward. When he spoke, the translator device on Jake's collar turned his words into English. "Welcome to Sifmar. Humans, I am High Counselor Vextar. We are curious about your kind." Ryan bowed slightly. "Thank you for meeting with us. We come in peace and hope to learn about your people." "Good," Vextar said. His tail moved in a slow circle. "This is Korthan, our war leader, and this is Zethara, who will be your guide while you stay with us." Jake looked at Zethara and felt something strange happen in his chest. She was smaller than the other 2, maybe only 6 feet tall, and her scales were a brighter green that seemed to glow. Her eyes were the same gold, but they held something different. Curiosity, maybe, or intelligence that went beyond just being smart. Zethara stepped forward and spoke in careful English. "I have been studying your language for many cycles. I hope to learn more about human ways while you are here." "Your English is very good," Dr. Foster said with a smile. "Thank you. Your species is most interesting to us. We have never met beings who travel between stars, but are so small and soft." Jake almost laughed. Small and soft. That was one way to describe humans when compared to 7-foot armored lizard people. As they walked through the city, Zethara pointed out important buildings and explained Vorthik customs. Jake found himself listening more to her voice than to what she was saying. She had a slight accent that made every word sound musical. "This is our learning center," she said, gesturing at a tower that seemed to be made entirely of blue crystal. "Young Vorthik come here to study the sciences and arts." "Arts?" Dr. Foster asked. "What kind of arts do your people create?" Zethara's tale, flicking what Jake would later learn, was excitement. "We shape metal and crystal into forms that please the eye. We also create sounds that stir the spirit. Perhaps you would call them songs." They stopped at a fountain in the center of a large square. The water was a light purple color and made soft chiming sounds as it fell. Vorthik walked past them, some stopping to stare at the strange visitors. "Are we the first aliens your people have met?" Ryan asked. "Yes," Zethara said. "Some of our people are afraid. Others are excited. I am in the excited group." A young Vorthik approached them with quick steps. He was even bigger than the others they had met, and his scales were dark red instead of green. He spoke rapidly in the Vorthik language, and his tail lashed back and forth. Zethara's posture changed. She stood straighter, and her own tail went. Rigid, she answered the red-scaled Vorthik in their language, her voice getting sharper with each word. "What is happening?" Jake asked quietly. "Gortham thinks we should not trust softskins," Zethara said. "He believes you are weak and will betray us when it suits you." The red Vorthik stepped closer to Jake. He was so tall that Jake had to look up to meet his eyes. When he spoke again, Zethara translated. "He says humans look like prey animals, small and defenseless." Jake felt his temper rise, but kept his voice calm. "Tell him that humans might be small, but we did not get to the stars by being weak." Zethara translated, and Gortham laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. He bared his teeth, showing fangs that were easily 3 inches long. Jake looked at those fangs and suddenly grinned. Without thinking, he said, "Well, hello there, sweet Fang. Nice dental work." The translator picked up his words and turned them into Vorthik language. Gortham looked confused, but Zethara made a sound that might have been a laugh. Her tail curled into an S shape. "Sweet Fang?" She repeated in English. "This is what you call me?" Jake realized his mistake too late. He had been looking at Zethara when he spoke, not Gortham. Sorry, I was just ... I like it," Zethara said. Her eyes seemed to sparkle. "Sweet Fang, it acknowledges what I am, but makes it sound pleasant. This is very human, I think." Gortham said something else and stalked away, clearly annoyed that the interaction had not gone as he planned. "What did he say?" Jake asked. "He said humans are strange and probably dangerous because of it," Zethara replied. "I told him that strange might not be bad." As they continued the tour, Jake noticed that Zethara kept looking at him with those bright gold eyes. Every time she did, she would repeat "Sweet Fang" quietly to herself, as if testing how the words felt. 3 weeks had passed since Jake first called Zethara Sweet Fang, and the nickname had stuck. She seemed to like it more each day, her tail doing that little curl whenever he used it. The diplomatic mission was going better than anyone had hoped. The Vorthik were interested in human technology, and humans were amazed by Vorthik engineering. Jake spent most of his time with Zethara, learning about her people and their ways. She was nothing like the other Vorthik he had met. Where they were, serious and formal, she was curious and playful. Where they followed old traditions without question, she asked why things had to be done certain ways. "Your people seem very focused on strength," Jake said as they walked through the Vorthik military training grounds. Young Vorthik practiced combat moves with weapons that looked like metal claws attached to their arms. "Strength is survival," Zethara replied. "For thousands of years, we fought other creatures on this world. The strong lived and the weak died. It is a hard truth, but truth nonetheless." Jake watched a particularly large young Vorthik Throw another one across the training. Circle. But you are different. You study languages and cultures instead of fighting. Zethara's tail dropped lower. Yes, I am what you might call an outcast. I am small for a Vorthic, and my interests are considered strange. Many of my people think I waste time on useless things. Learning about other beings is not useless, Jake said firmly. Without you, we would never have understood your people so well. Thank you, Jake Morrison. But my people do not see it that way. They think I should focus on traditional female roles, or at least try to be a better warrior. They walked in silence for a while. Jake was starting to understand that Cithara's position in her society was complicated. She was smart and capable, but did not fit the roles her people expected. What are traditional female roles for Vorthic? He asked, bearing young, maintaining the home territory, supporting a mate's career. Important things, but not what calls. To my spirit. Jake thought about human society and how it had changed over the centuries. Humans used to have similar traditions. Females were expected to stay home while males did everything else. We learned that was stupid. Everyone should be able to choose their own path. Zethara stopped walking and stared at him. Females in your society can be warriors, leaders, explorers? Of course. Our ship captain is female. D.R. Foster leads our science team. Half our military is made up of women who could probably kick my ass in a fair fight. This is amazing, Zethara said. Her tail was moving in rapid circles now. Your people have moved beyond the old ways. You judge individuals by their abilities, not their gender or size. It took us a long time to figure that out. But yes, that is how we try to do things now. They continued their tour, visiting the crystal gardens where Vorthic grew their food. The plants were unlike anything on Earth, with leaves that changed, color based on how much light they received, and fruits that tasted like a mix of chocolate and cinnamon. These are beautiful, Dr. Foster said, taking readings with her scanner. The way they process nutrients is completely different from Earth. Plants. Zethara picked one of the fruits and offered it to Jake. Try this. It is called sithberry, and it is my favorite. Jake bit into the fruit, and his eyes widened. This is incredible. It tastes like dessert. I am glad you enjoy it, Zethara said. She had moved closer to him while he ate, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns in her scales. Ryan Cooper was busy talking to High Counselor Vextar about trade agreements. D.R. Foster was collecting samples of everything she could find. That left Jake and Zethiara to explore on their own, which happened more and more often. Would you like to see something special? Zethara asked. Something most visitors do not get to see? Sure, Jake said. Lead the way, Sweet Fang. She led him to a building that looked different from the others. Instead of crystal and metal, it was made from smooth white stone. Inside, the walls were covered with intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story. This is our history hall, Zethara explained. These carvings show the story of my people from our earliest days to now. Jake studied the carvings. They showed Vorthic fighting giant beasts, building their first cities, and reaching for the stars. This is amazing. How old are these? Some are thousands of years old. Others are added as new events happen. See this section here? It shows the arrival of humans. Jake looked where she pointed and saw crude but recognizable figures that were clearly meant to be humans. They were shown standing beside Vorthic figures in what looked like friendship. You added us to your history? History is still being made, Zethara said. Your arrival is an important event. It changes everything. For my people. They stood close together, looking at the carvings. Jake became aware that Zethara was watching him more than she was looking at the wall. Jake Morrison, she said quietly. May I ask you something personal? Of course. Do humans form? Attachments to individuals outside their species? I have. Read about human pets and working animals. But I mean something deeper. Emotional connections. Jake thought about the question. It was not something he had ever considered before meeting her. I do not know. Humans have never met another intelligent species before yours. But I think, yes, I think we probably could. Emotions are about understanding and caring, not about what someone looks like. Zethara's tail curled into that shape again. I ask because I am experiencing something unusual. Since meeting you, I have thoughts and feelings that are new to me. Among my people, we have a concept called thalmesh. It means a deep connection between two individuals that goes beyond normal relationships. Jake's heart started beating faster. What kind of connection? Partnership, understanding. A bond that makes both individuals stronger together than they are apart. It is rare among Vorthik and considered very precious when it happens. And you think you might be feeling this with... Zethara looked down at her feet. I know it sounds impossible. We are different species. But when I am with you, I feel complete in a way I never have before. You see me as I am, not as what others think I should be. Jake reached out slowly and touched her arm. Her scales were warm and smoother than he had expected. I feel something too, sweet Fang. I look forward to seeing you every day. I think about our conversations when we are apart. I want to protect you and make you happy. She looked up at him with those bright gold eyes. This is Thalmesh, I think, but it has never happened between different species before. I do not know what it means or what we should do about it. Before Jake could answer, they heard voices approaching. Ryan Cooper and Dr. Foster were coming into the history hall with several Vorthik officials. There you are, Ryan called. We have been looking for you. The High Counselor wants to show us the mountain research facility tomorrow. Jake and Zethara stepped apart quickly, but not before Dr. Foster noticed their close proximity. She gave Jake a questioning look, but said nothing. That night, back on the human ship, Dr. Foster cornered Jake in the mess hall. You and Zethara seem to be getting along well, she said carefully. She is a good guide and teacher, Jake replied. I am learning a lot about Vorthik culture. Jake, I am a scientist. I observe things. And what I observe is two beings who are developing feelings for each other. Jake sighed. Is it that obvious? To me, yes. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I do not know. Is it even possible? A relationship between a human and a Vorthik? Dr. Foster was quiet for a moment. From a biological standpoint, there are more similarities than you might expect. Both species form pair bonds. Both have complex emotional responses. Both value loyalty and companionship. But there would be challenges. Cultural differences, physical differences, and the fact that no one has ever tried this before. Jake stared out the window at the alien stars. She thinks we might have something called thalmesh, a deep bond between individuals. That is significant, Dr. Foster said. From what I have learned, thalmesh is sacred to the Vorthik. They believe. It happens perhaps once in a lifetime, and only between individuals who are perfectly matched. So what do I do? Dr. Foster smiled. What does your heart tell you to do? Jake thought about Zethara's bright eyes and curious mind. He thought about how she made him laugh, and how she seemed to understand him better than most humans did. My heart tells me to see where this goes, he said finally. Then that is what you should do. Just be careful. This could change everything for both your species. The mountain research facility was built into the side of a massive cliff that rose up from the valley floor like a giant stone wall. Vorthak engineers had carved laboratories and living spaces directly into the rock, creating a complex that was both hidden and secure. Jake walked beside Zethara as their group followed High Counselor Vexstar through the winding tunnels. "This is where we study the deep metals," Vexstar explained. "The mountain contains rare elements that we use in our most advanced technology." Dr. Foster was practically bouncing with excitement as she took readings on everything around them. "The mineral composition here is extraordinary. Some of these elements do not exist naturally on Earth." Jake was more interested in watching Zethara than looking at rocks. Over the past few days, their connection had grown stronger. They found excuses to spend time together, talking about everything from human music to Vorthic philosophy. The more he learned about her, the more convinced he became that what they had was special. "Jake Morrison," Zethara said quietly as they walked. "Tonight there will be a gathering of the research teams. Would you like to see how my people celebrate?" "Achievements? I would like that very much, sweet Fang." Her tail did that little curl that told him she was happy. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to him now. The celebration took place in a large cavern deep inside the mountain. Vorthic researchers had gathered to share their latest discoveries and honor particularly successful projects. Jake and the other humans were welcomed as honored guests, though some Vorthic still watched them with suspicious eyes. Zethara introduced Jake to several of her colleagues. Most were polite but distant. Jake got the impression that Zethara's association with the humans was causing her problems with her own people. "Dr. Kethin is our lead metallurgist," Zethara said, gesturing to an elderly Vorthic with silver scales. "His work with crystal metal fusion is revolutionary." Dr. Kethin studied Jake with sharp golden eyes. "You are the human warrior who calls Zethara by a pet name?" Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I meant no disrespect. It was meant as a term of friendship." "Friendship," Dr. Kethin repeated. "An interesting concept. Tell me, human, what do you know of Vorthic bonding customs?" "Very little," Jake admitted. "Zethara has explained some basics, but I know I have much to learn." "Indeed." Dr. Kethin's tail moved in slow patterns. "Zethara is unusual among our kind. She seeks connections that others find ... inappropriate." Zethara stepped closer to Jake. "Dr. Kethin believes I should focus on traditional roles rather than exploring new possibilities." "New possibilities can be dangerous," the old Vorthic said, "especially when they involve outsiders." Before Jake could respond, a younger Vorthic approached their group. This one was different from the others Jake had met. His scales were darker green, and he moved with the fluid grace of a natural fighter. Jake recognized the type immediately. Warrior trying to look civilized. "Zethara," the newcomer said in accented English. "I see you still spend time with the softskins." "Corthin," Zethara replied. Her voice was carefully neutral, but Jake could see tension in the way she held. Her tail. "I did not expect to see you here. I came to observe these humans for myself," Corthin said, his golden eyes fixed on Jake. "To see what has captured your attention so completely." Jake met the Vorthic's stare evenly. "And what is your conclusion?" "That humans are weaker than I expected, but perhaps more clever. You use words and tools to accomplish what we would do with strength and claws." "Different approaches for different situations," Jake said. "Humans have learned that sometimes the clever solution is better than the strong one." Corthin laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "Perhaps, but what happens when cleverness fails? When words are not enough, what does a human do when faced with real danger?" "We adapt," Jake said simply. "We find a way." "How convenient. And what way would you find if someone challenged your claim to Zethara's attention?" The cavern suddenly seemed quieter. Other Vorthic had stopped their conversations to listen. Jake felt Zethara tense beside him. "I would do whatever was necessary to protect someone I care about," Jake said carefully. even if it meant facing a Vorthic warrior in single combat? Jake's heart started beating faster. This was clearly heading somewhere dangerous. If that was the only option, then yes. Corthan stepped closer. He was taller than Jake by more than a foot and easily twice as heavy. Natural armor plating covered his chest and arms. When he smiled, his fangs gleamed in the crystal light. Interesting. Because according to our customs, your relationship with Zethara is inappropriate unless you are prepared to defend it according to our laws. What laws? Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Zethara spoke up, her voice tight with worry. Corthan, this is not necessary. Is it not? Corthan replied. You have been acting as if this human is your chosen companion. By our laws, such a claim must be validated through trial, by combat if challenged. Dr. Foster had been listening with growing alarm. Surely there must be some other way to resolve this. There is, Zethara said quietly. I could renounce any claim to companionship with Jake Morrison. I could agree to follow traditional paths and seek a Vorthic mate. No, Jake said immediately. That is not happening. Zethara looked at him with wide eyes. Jake, you do not understand what you are saying. Trial by combat with a Vorthic warrior is not like human fighting. It is meant to prove worthiness through strength and skill. You could be seriously injured or worse. I understand perfectly, Jake said. He looked directly at Corthan. I accept your challenge. The cavern erupted in surprised voices. Vorthic began talking rapidly in their own language, while the humans stared at Jake in shock. Jake, what are you doing? Ryan Cooper demanded. This could destroy our entire diplomatic mission. Some things are more important than diplomacy, Jake replied. He had not taken his eyes off Corthan. When do we fight? Tomorrow at dawn, Corthan said. He seemed pleased by Jake's acceptance. In the traditional arena, combat continues until one opponent yields or cannot continue. What weapons? Jake asked. No weapons. Natural abilities only. Claws, fangs, strength, and speed. Jake nodded, even though his stomach was churning. Corthan had natural weapons and armor that Jake lacked entirely. This was going to be the fight of his life. After Corthan left, Zethara pulled Jake aside. You should not have accepted, she said. Her voice was shaking. Corthan is one of our finest warriors. He has never lost a challenge fight. Maybe it is time his winning streak ended, Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. This is not a joke, Jake Morrison. You could die tomorrow. Jake took her hands in his. Her scales were warm, and he could feel her trembling. Sweet Fang, listen to me. What we have is worth fighting for. I would rather risk everything than lose you to fear. Tears were forming in her golden eyes. But what if I lose you instead? You will not lose me, I promise. That night, Jake could not sleep. He spent hours thinking about the fight ahead and what it meant. Dr. Foster had explained that by accepting the challenge, he was essentially declaring Zethara to be his chosen mate according to Vorthic law. If he won, their relationship would be officially recognized. If he lost, he would probably be too injured to continue the mission, and Zethara would face exile for her inappropriate attachment to an alien. No pressure. At all. Jake had been in combat many times during his military career, but never anything like this. He would be fighting a larger, stronger opponent with natural weapons and armor. His only advantages were his human agility and unpredictability. As dawn approached, Jake made his way to the arena. It was a circular space carved into the mountain, with stone seats rising up around it. Hundreds of Vorthic had gathered to watch, along with the human diplomatic team. Corthan was already waiting in the center of the arena. He had removed his metal decorations and stood in his natural state, looking like a 7-foot-tall dragon that had learned to walk upright. Jake walked into the arena wearing only basic clothing. He felt very small and very human surrounded by all those alien eyes. High Counselor Vextar stood and addressed the crowd in the Vorthic language. Then he switched to English. This combat will determine the validity of the bond claimed between Zethara of the Vorthic and Jake Morrison of the humans. Let both fighters show honor and courage. Jake looked up at the crowd and found Zethara's face among the watchers. She was staring at him with those bright golden eyes, her tail curled tight with anxiety. He smiled at her and mouthed the words, "Sweet Fang," one more time. Then Corthan roared, and the fight began. Corthan moved faster than Jake had expected. One moment the Vorthic warrior was standing across the arena. The next he was charging forward, with claws extended and fangs bared. Jake barely managed to throw himself sideways, feeling the wind from Corthan's swing brush past his face. The crowd of watching Vorthic made sounds that might have been approval or disapproval. Jake could not tell which, and did not have time to think about it. Corthan spun around and came at him again, this time with a calculated series of claw strikes that forced Jake to keep backing up. "Stand still, little human," Corthan growled. "Make this easier for both of us." Jake ducked under another swing and tried to get inside Corthan's reach. He managed to land a quick punch to the Vorthic's ribs, but it was like hitting a stone wall. Corthan's natural armor absorbed the impact without any visible effect. Corthan backhanded Jake across the face, sending him stumbling backward. Jake tasted blood and realized his lip was split. The Vorthic's casual blow had more force behind it than most human punches. "You fight like prey," Corthan said, running and hiding instead of meeting strength with strength. Jake wiped blood from his mouth and grinned. "I fight like a human. We are very good at staying alive." He had been studying Corthan's movements and noticed something important. The Vorthic warrior was incredibly strong and well-armored, but he fought like someone who had never faced an opponent who used different tactics. Corthan expected direct confrontation, strength against strength, the way Vorthic had probably fought for thousands of years. Jake began moving in a circle around his opponent, staying just out of reach. Corthan turned to follow him, growing more frustrated with each passing moment. "Coward," Corthan snarled. "Face me properly." "I am facing you," Jake replied. "Just not the way you want me to." Jake suddenly changed direction and rolled under Corthan's swing, coming up behind the larger warrior. He grabbed Corthan's tail and pulled hard, using the Vorthic's own momentum to send him crashing into the arena wall. The crowd made surprised sounds. Apparently grabbing someone's tail was not a common fighting tactic among Vorthic. Corthan recovered quickly and spun around with fury in his golden eyes. "Dishonorable tactics. Effective tactics," Jake corrected. "The goal is to win, not to look good doing it." They circled each other again. Jake was breathing hard and had several cuts from Corthan's claws, but he was still mobile. Corthan looked annoyed, but not seriously hurt. Jake needed to think of something else. Pure endurance would not work in his favor. Corthan was bigger and stronger, which meant he could probably outlast a human in a long fight. The answer came when Corthan charged again. Instead of dodging sideways, Jake dropped flat on his back and kicked upward with both feet, catching Corthan in the stomach and using the Vorthic's own momentum to flip him overhead. Corthan landed hard on his back with a crash that echoed through the arena. For a moment he lay still, stunned by the unexpected maneuver. Jake rolled to his feet and pressed his advantage. He jumped onto Corthan's chest and began throwing punches at the warrior's unarmored throat and face. It was not elegant, but it was working. Corthan roared and threw Jake off him with enough force to send the human skidding across the stone floor. Jake's back scraped against the rough surface, leaving burning scratches but he managed to get back on his feet. Both fighters were breathing hard now. Corthan had a cut above one eye, and his movements were slightly less coordinated. Jake was bleeding from multiple wounds, and his ribs ached where Corthan had connected with solid hits. "You are tougher than you look, human," Corthan admitted. "But this ends now." The Vorthic warrior's next attack was different. Instead of the wild charges he had been using, Corthan moved with careful precision, cutting off Jake's escape routes and forcing him into the corner of the arena. Jake found himself trapped with nowhere to run. Corthan approached slowly, savoring his advantage. "Yield now, and I will make it quick," Corthan offered. Jake looked up at the crowd and found Zethara's face again. She was watching with desperate hope in her golden eyes. Her tail was coiled so tightly with anxiety that it looked painful. "Not happening," Jake said. Corthan lunged forward with both claws extended. Jake had nowhere to dodge, so he did something completely insane instead. He stepped directly into the attack, letting Corthan's claws scrape along his sides while he wrapped his arms around the Vorthic's neck. Corthan was so surprised by the move that he hesitated for just a moment. That moment was all Jake needed. He pulled himself up and sank his teeth into the soft spot where Corthan's neck met his shoulder. The Vorthic warrior screamed in pain and rage. He tried to pull Jake off, but the human held on with desperate determination. Jake was not trying to cause serious damage. He was trying to prove a point. "Humans have fangs too," Jake said between gritted teeth. Corthan finally managed to grab Jake and throw him away, but not before Jake had drawn blood. The Vorthic touched his neck and stared at the red drops on his fingers with amazement. "Impossible," Corthan said. "You bit me, like a wild animal." "Like a human who refuses to give up," Jake corrected. He was swaying on his feet, but still standing. "We might not have claws or armor, but we have other advantages." "Such as?" "We are too stupid to know when we are beaten." Jake's legs gave out, and he collapsed to one knee. He was losing too much blood from his various wounds, and his vision was starting to blur. But he had made his point. He had lasted longer against Corthan than anyone had expected, and he had drawn blood from the supposedly unbeatable warrior. Corthan stood over him, breathing heavily. "You should yield, human. You have fought with honor, but you cannot win." Jake looked up at him through eyes that were having trouble focusing. "Maybe not, but I proved something important." "What?" "That love makes you stronger than you think." "You are." Corthan blinked in surprise. The word love had come through the translator clearly. 6 months later, Jake sat at his desk in the newly constructed research station that orbited Kepler 442c and watched Zethara arrange her work materials in what had become her favorite spot. She had claimed the corner of his desk on her first day aboard the station and refused to work anywhere else. Her tail twitched as she read through diplomatic reports, a sign that she was concentrating hard on something. The station was a marvel of combined human and Vorthic engineering. Human technology provided the life support and faster-than-light communication systems, while Vorthic crystal metal fusion techniques made the structure stronger and more efficient than anything either species could have built alone. It was a perfect symbol of what cooperation could accomplish. "The trade negotiations with the Earth colonies are going well," Zethara said without looking up from her tablet. 3 more systems want to establish Vorthic mining partnerships." "That is good news," Jake replied. "What about the cultural exchange program?" 15 young Vorthic have applied to study at human universities, and 23 human students want to come here. The integration is happening faster than anyone expected. Jake smiled as he watched her work. The nicknamed Sweet Fang had evolved into something deeper over the months. It was still their private joke, but now it represented the journey they had taken together from strangers to partners in both love and diplomacy. Their relationship had not been easy, Both Earth Command and the Vorthik High Council had initially opposed the idea of an interspecies partnership in official roles. It had taken weeks of careful negotiation and political maneuvering to convince both governments that Jake and Zethara's bond could be an asset rather than a liability. The breakthrough had come when they proposed the cultural exchange station. Instead of trying to fit their relationship into existing frameworks, they created something entirely new. Jake served as the human ambassador to Vorthik space, while Zethara represented her people in dealings with humanity. Together, they had become the first official interspecies diplomatic team in galactic history. "Jake Morrison," Zethara said, finally looking up from her work. "We have received an interesting proposal from the Vorthik Science Council." "What kind of proposal?" "They want to fund a joint exploration mission to survey the outer planets in this system. They believe our partnership model could be useful for making contact with other species we might encounter." Jake leaned back in his chair. "A first contact team made up of humans and Vorthik working together?" "Exactly. Your people bring adaptability and creative thinking. Mine brings strength and advanced materials technology. Together, we might be better equipped to handle whatever we find than either species would be alone." The idea was appealing. Jake had always been an explorer at heart, and the thought of venturing into unknown space with Zethara by his side was exciting. What would that mean for us personally? He asked. Zethara's tail curled into that familiar S shape. We would be pioneers again. The first interspecies team to represent both our civilizations to whatever intelligence we might discover. Jake stood up and moved to the large window that looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were other worlds, other forms of life, other opportunities for understanding and cooperation. The galaxy was vast and full of possibilities. "Remember when I first called you Sweet Fang?" he said. "How could I forget? You looked so embarrassed when you realized the translator had picked it up. I thought it was just a joke, a silly nickname for someone I had just met." Zethara joined him at the window. "And now? Now I understand that some of the most important things in life start as accidents. I was not trying to change the course of galactic history when I made that comment. I was just reacting to meeting someone who seemed interesting." "The best discoveries are often unplanned," Zethara agreed. "We set out to establish trade relations and ended up proving that love transcends species barriers." Jake reached over and took her hand. Her scales were warm and familiar now, as much a part of his daily life as breathing. "Are you ready for another adventure, Sweet Fang?" "With you, always." They stood together looking out at the stars, planning their next mission. The universe was enormous and full of unknowns, but they would face it together. Human adaptability combined with Vorthik strength, curiosity paired with courage, love, strengthened by understanding. A communication alert chimed from Jake's desk. He reluctantly left the window to check the message. It was from Captain Hayes, who had returned to Earth to brief the Space Command about the success of the Vorthik mission. "Jake," the recorded message began, "I have good news and interesting news. The good news is that both Earth Command and the Vorthik High Council have approved your exploration proposal. The interesting news is that we have detected artificial signals from 3 other star systems. It appears you and Zethara are going to be busier than expected." Jake looked at Zethara, who had been listening with growing excitement. Her tail was practically vibrating with anticipation. 3 new civilizations to contact, she said. 3 opportunities to build bridges between species. 3 chances to prove that cooperation is stronger than conflict, Jake added. They spent the next hour reviewing the preliminary data about the signal sources. One appeared to be coming from a water world in a nearby system. Another originated from a planet with unusual electromagnetic properties. The third was the most intriguing a collection of artificial structures in orbit around a red giant star. "We will need a larger crew for this mission," Zethara said. "More specialists from both our species." "Dr. Foster will want to come," Jake said. "And we should ask for some of your people's best xenobiologists. Also historians and cultural specialists. If we are going to make contact with multiple species, we need to understand how different forms of intelligence might develop." As they planned, Jake found himself thinking about how much had changed since that first day in the Vortex City. He had been a simple military liaison then, concerned mainly with following orders and keeping everyone safe. Now he was helping to shape the future of galactic civilization. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not called you Sweet Fang that first day?" he asked. Zethara considered the question seriously. "We would probably have completed a successful trade mission and returned to our respective worlds. The Vorthek would have remained isolated, and humans would have continued exploring alone. No interspecies cooperation, no cultural exchange, no joint exploration missions. "No us," Zethara added quietly. Jake pulled her closer. "I prefer this timeline." "As do I, my stubborn human." Outside their window, the stars beckoned with infinite possibilities. Somewhere among those distant lights were other forms of life, other civilizations waiting to be discovered, other opportunities for understanding and friendship. Jake Morrison had started this journey as a soldier following orders. He had become an explorer, a diplomat, and a bridge between worlds. Most importantly, he had learned that the universe was a much more interesting place when shared with someone who saw it through different eyes. Zethara curled up on her favorite corner of the desk, her tail twitching as she returned to reading reports about their next destination. Jake watched her work and smiled. Some people spent their whole lives looking for their purpose. He had found his by accident with a careless joke that became the foundation for a new age of galactic cooperation. "Ready for another impossible mission, Sweet Fang?" he asked. "With humans, the impossible is merely a starting point," she replied without looking up from her work. Jake laughed and began planning their next adventure among the stars.